In a galaxy of art, the TCS Bastion was an obscenity. While the navies of the Ashen Concordat and the Voltaic Imperium glided through the void in ships that were sleek, crystalline, and impossibly elegant. Vessels grown, not built, humming with the silent, terrible perfection of fifth-generation AI, the Bastion was a brick. It was a 1.5-kilometer-long insult of gray, pockmarked, variable density, dumb, armor, bolted and welded together in the orbital shipyards of Titan. It had no elegant energy lances. It had no predictive logic battle core. It had pipes that clanged, vents that hissed steam, and a reactor that was, according to official Concordat reports, a dangerously unshielded, high-radiation, brute-force fission plant. It was, by every metric of the galactic standard, the dumbest warship in the galaxy, and it had just been assigned a new and equally disgraced captain. Captain Aris Thorne stood on the Bastion's bridge, his pristine black uniform a stark contrast to the environment. The bridge was not the silent, holographic thought sphere he was used to. This was a pit. It smelled of ozone, burnt coffee, and human sweat. Men and women in greasy, practical gray jumpsuits manned stations that had physical controls. There were levers, dials, toggle switches protected by little red caps. "It's a submarine," Aris whispered to himself, his lip curling in disgust. "They've given me a flying, nuclear submarine." "She's not a submarine, sir." A voice, sharp and accented, cut through his reverie. He turned. Chief Engineer Alina Sparks Rostova stood there, wiping her hands on an already filthy rag. She was a compact woman with black hair pulled into a tight, practical bun, and her eyes held a defiant, proprietary gleam. "Submarines are quiet, the Bastion," she sings. As if on cue, a deep, resonant thud clang echoed through the hull, making the deck plates vibrate. Aris flinched. Rostova grinned. "That's just the number 2 coolant pump recycling," she said. "She's got a rhythm." Aris Thorne was a man of logic. He was a graduate of the Terran Smart War Academy. He had commanded the TCS Seraphim, an elegant Archangel-class cruiser, a ship that fought its battles in tandem with its battle AI, Gabriel. They fought with predictive algorithms, phase shielding, and lance geometry. It was war as mathematics. And it had failed. He still saw the wreck of the TCS horizon in his nightmares. His AI, Gabriel, had predicted with 99.98% certainty that the Kathur pirate lord would flee to the Epsilon gas cloud. Gabriel was wrong. The Kathur had done the illogical thing, a suicide burn at the Seraphim. By the time Aris's smart ship could recalculate, the horizon, his escort, was a cloud of superheated atoms. The Inquiry Board had called it AI-reliance syndrome, a failure of primal instinct, a failure of the human element. So they had stripped him of his smart ship and given him the dumbest ship in the fleet as a penance. A ship with no AI, a ship that ran on primal instinct and apparently steam. "My apologies, Chief Engineer," Aris said, his voice stiff. "I am accustomed to a different rhythm report." "Reactor is stable at 80%, Rostova said, her smile not fading. "She's leaking chaotic energy like a sieve, just like I like her. Magnetic containment is, well, it's contained. Mostly." "Leaking," Aris's eye twitched. "Leaking what precisely?" "Potential, Captain, just. Potential, the smart ships, they're quiet, coded, they run on clean energy. They whisper their call sign to the void, the Bastion," she screams. "Every smart sensor in 5 light minutes is probably having a migraine right now. They can't stand noise. And we are all noise." Aris turned away from her, his jaw clenched. This was not a command. This was a prison. This was a career-ending joke. "Helm," he addressed the pilot, a young man who looked more like a street tracer than an officer, his console covered in unauthorized, hand-drawn diagrams. "Set a course for the Gethsemane corridor. We're on. Convoy escort duty." The word convoy felt like ash in his mouth. "Aye, aye, Captain," the pilot, Lieutenant Jax, Jester Kincaid, replied, not even turning. He yanked a physical lever and the Bastion groaned, a sound like a mountain shifting. The entire ship lurched to the side, throwing Aris against the navigation table. "My God, Lieutenant," Aris roared. "Is subtlety not in your dumb ship vocabulary? Engage thrusters gently." "Sorry, sir," Jester called back, unconcerned. "This old girl, she's got sticky flaps. You gotta kick her to get her to turn. She's not a smart ship, sir. She's a muscle car. You don't suggest a turn, you force it." Aris closed his eyes. He was in hell. The Gethsemane corridor was a dirty, sensor-baffling trade route on the edge of Voltaic Imperium space. The Voltaic were an ancient, arrogant species. They were the artists of the galaxy. Their ships were the most elegant. Their AI, the Voltaic Prime Codex, was considered infallible. They looked at humanity as vermin, loud, chaotic, emotional brutes, and the Bastion to them was the pinnacle of human brutishness. Eris was in the captain's quarters, a cramped metal box that smelled of mildew when the alert clanged. Not a polite chime, a physical, screaming bell that reverberated through his bones. He stormed onto the bridge. "What is that noise?" "That's the proximity alert, sir," Jester said, grinning. "Told ya she sings." "Contact," the sensor officer yelled, a young woman peering into a foggy green scope that looked like it was from a museum. "It's Voltaic. Harbinger-class cruiser, sir. It's the Gleaming Scythe." Eris felt his blood run cold. The Gleaming Scythe, the Harbinger, Prelate Cathar's flagship. It wasn't a border patrol, it was an executioner. They're not here for us," Eris stammered, his smart war training kicking in. "Run the algorithms. Find the escape vector. They're after the convoy. Jester, bring us about. Find a nebula. We can't fight that." "Sir," Jester said, his voice suddenly hard, "they're not after the convoy. They're coming right at us." "On screen," Eris said, his voice hollow. The view screen, a flickering, low-resolution panel, lit up. The Gleaming Scythe was a thing of terrible beauty. It looked like a shard of obsidian and light gliding through space with an arrogant silence. The face of Prelate Cathar appeared. He was a tall, thin creature, his skin like polished porcelain, his eyes black voids. He looked at Eris with an expression of profound disgust. "Captain Eris Thorne," Cathar's voice hissed, translated perfectly by the Voltaic AI. It sounded like glass shattering. "The failed commander of the Seraphim. They have given you a flying garbage scow. It is poetic." State your intentions, Prelate," Eris said, his voice shaking with humiliation. "My intentions," Cathar seemed to smile. It was a horrifying sight. "My intent," the transmission suddenly dissolved into a shriek of static. What was that?" Eris snapped. Rostova's voice came over the bridgecom. "Sorry, Captain, my reactor just had hiccup, leaked a bit of tachyradiation right at his pretty face. My mistake." Eris could hear the grin in her voice. Cathar's face reappeared, now flickering with rage. The AI translation was stuttering. You, vermin, you dare interfere. Your ship is an aberration, a dumb insult to the logic of the void. The Prime Codex has decreed that such chaos cannot be permitted to exist. We are here to correct you." "Correct us," Eris whispered. "Energy spike," Jester yelled. He's charging his phase lance. He's not here for the convoy. He's here to execute us." The mathematics flashed in Eris's mind. A Harbinger-class phase lance V's a dreadnought with no energy shields. His AI training screamed one result: annihilation in 0.3 seconds. There was no optimal move. There was no escape. They were dead. "Captain," Jester yelled, his hands a blur on his analog controls. "Sir, begging your pardon, but your AA training is stupid." What did you say, Lieutenant?" Eris was frozen. I said, it's stupid," Jester shouted, his eyes wild. You're trying to run a smart war play. This is a dumb ship. We can't run, we can't dodge, so we gotta do the one thing his AI will never predict." "And what is that?" Jester slammed his fist onto a large red button that wasn't even on his console. It was bolted to the side. We charge him, we fly straight down his throat." The ship screamed, sound of tortured metal, as Jester, without orders, jammed the main thrusters to full. The Bastion, this 1.5-kilometer-long brick, leaped forward on a direct, suicidal, head-on collision course with the Gleaming Scythe. Eris was thrown to the deck. He looked up at the view screen, at the terrifying, beautiful Voltaic ship growing larger, its phase lance glowing, terrible, blinding white. He was going to die. killed by the dumbest ship and the dumbest crew in the galaxy. The universe seemed to hold its breath. On the bridge of the gleaming scythe, Prelate Cathar watched his tactical display with utter cold contempt. The aberration! The Bastion was charging him. It was a move of such primal, idiotic desperation that Cathar almost felt insulted. His Prime Codex, the infallible battle AI, had analyzed the move in a picosecond. Threat analysis, Terran vessel Bastion, EXECUTNG 0% optimal maneuver, suicidal charge. Predicted outcome, self-annihilation upon impact with Harbinger-class phase lance. Recommendation, maintain firing solution. Correct the aberration. Imbeciles, Cathar hissed, watching the gray, ugly brick grow larger. Fire. A beam of pure, coherent, violet-white energy, a kilometer long and as bright as a dying star, erupted from the gleaming scythe's prow. It was a phase lance. It was designed to phase through conventional kinetic shields and boil the crew and smart systems of an enemy ship from the inside out. Against the unshielded, dumb Bastion, it would be conclusive. On the Bastion's bridge, Aris Thorn hauled himself back into his command chair, his face ashen. He was screaming, "Jester, pull up, you lunatic! You've killed us all!" "Not yet, Cap'n," Jester roared, his knuckles white as he gripped the analog stick. "Sparks, juice, me. Giving you all she's got." Ristova's voice shrieked over the comm, followed by a sound like a generator tearing itself apart. "Chief," Aris yelled, "what are you?" "Magnetic field containment," Jester shouted, his eyes wide, fixed on the approaching beam. "We ain't got smart shields, we got magnets, sparks, now." Overcharging the COILS. A deep, bone-jarring HUMMMM vibrated through the Bastion. The lights flickered and the smell of ozone became so thick it was choking. Aris saw his arm hairs stand on end. The phase lance hit them. But it didn't penetrate. The Bastion wasn't a normal ship. Its brute force fission plant was so unshielded, so dirty, that it required a massive, overpowered magnetic containment field just to keep from irradiating its own crew. Ristova, by overcharging it, hadn't created a shield. She had turned the entire ship into a kilometer-long electromagnet. The phase lance, a beam of energy, hit this gargantuan, chaotic magnetic field and bent. It was physics so brute force, so dumb that no AI would ever have calculated it. You don't block a bullet. You make the air around you so dense that it stops. The beam of violet-white energy slammed into the field and smeared, diffusing around the hull in a gorgeous, terrifying corona of light. It looked like a solar flare washing over a rock. The outer ablative armor boiled. Massive sheets of metal slewed off, vaporized. The ship screamed. The bridge was a vibration hell. Alarms wailed, the real physical ones, and Aris was sure his teeth would shake loose. But they were alive. They were inside the beam. They were flying through the lance. On the gleaming scythe, Prelate Cathar stared. His black eyes widened. This was impossible. The vermin ship was... It was still coming. The Prime Codex was cycling, its logic core stuttering. Analysis anomaly, target is absorbing, lance energy recalculating, error, logic paradox DETCTD. The AI couldn't understand. The Bastion wasn't shielding the energy. It was letting its own armor burn. It was accepting the damage. It was a ship designed to be hit. It was trading its own flesh for distance. "Stop, firing," Cathar screeched. His AI was paralyzed, so he gave a manual order. The phase lance cut off. And the Bastion, blackened, smoking, half-melted, burst from the energy cloud, its prow now only 5 kilometers from the scythe. It was too close, point-blank range. It stopped firing. Jester yelled, his face a mask of manic joy. They're scared." "Captain," the weapons officer roared, his hands gripping 2 massive joystick-like firing controls. "Mac gun is in the green. We got a solution." "A Mac gun," Aris stammered. The Bastion didn't have elegant lances. It had one weapon, a spinal mount magnetic accelerator cannon. A giant, dumb gun, it didn't fire energy. It fired a 20-ton solid tungsten rod at .5 light speed. It was a weapon of such Neanderthal brute force that no elegant fleet used it. It was a barbarian's club. Fire, Aris roared, his own AI training shattering in an explosion of pure primal rage. He didn't know what else to say. Firing. The Bastion didn't fire with a polite pew. It bucked. The entire ship was the gun. A sound like the crack of doom shook the hull as the magnetic coils discharged. The tungsten rod, a giant flying telephone pole, crossed the 5 kilometers in an instant. The gleaming scythe shields were up, but they were energy shields. They were designed to stop Lance's plasma lasers. They were not designed to stop a 20-ton piece of metal. The rod hit the shield. It didn't stop. It didn't slow down. It just ignored it. The voltaic shield flared, and the rod went through it like paper. It struck the gleaming scythe midship. The voltaic ship was art. It was delicate, crystalline, and light. It was not designed for impact. There was no explosion. Not at first. It was just penetration. The 20-ton rod, traveling at impossible speed, slammed through the voltaic prow, through its command center, through its reactor core, and out the other side. It gutted the ship, end to end. For a second, the gleaming scythe just hung there, a perfect, elegant shard of obsidian, with a massive, gaping, perfectly round hole through its center. Then its containment failed. The ship bloomed into a silent, expanding fireball of violet and white energy. The shockwave hit the Bastion, and the ship clanged like a bell. On the bridge, everyone was silent. They stared at the expanding cloud of debris. "Status," Aris whispered, his throat dry. His mind was blank. The math was wrong. Everything was wrong. Target is obliterated, sir," the weapons officer said, his voice full of awe. Hull integrity at 40%, Rostova reported from engineering. Her voice was shaking, but Aris heard the joy in it. The lance burn melted half our armor. The Mac gun's recoil shattered 3 main support beams. And my reactor, beautiful reactor, is glowing like a Christmas tree. It was glorious, Captain. Aris looked at Jester. The pilot was leaning back in his chair, his arms behind his head, looking at the wreckage. "See, Cap'n," Jester said, his voice casual, dumb, simple, violent. "They never see it coming. They're too smart to be this stupid." Aris felt a strange sensation. It wasn't fear. It wasn't shame. It was a deep primal thrill. He hadn't outthought the enemy. He hadn't outmaneuvered them. He had punched them. He had hit them with a rock. "Helm," Aris said, his voice still shaky but harder. Bring us about. Let's go home. And someone get me a real cup of coffee." He looked at the wreckage of the most elegant warship in the voltaic fleet, and for the first time, he looked around his ugly, clanging, steam-filled bridge, and he didn't see a prison. He saw a sledgehammer. The destruction of the gleaming scythe sent a shockwave, not of energy, but of pure, unadulterated confusion across the galactic comms net. The voltaic Imperium was, for the first time in 1,000 years, silent. They issued no threats. They declared no war. They just stopped broadcasting. This was, as Terran High Command noted, profoundly unsettling. The only transmission from voltaic space was a high-bandwidth, encrypted data packet sent to the Ashen Concordat, simply labeling the TCS Bastion a Class 1 paradox vector and a non-logical threat. Humanity, on the other hand, was loud. The Bastion limped back to Titan Station, its pockmarked hull charred, melted, and missing literal acres of armor. It was the ugliest, most terrifying, and most beautiful thing the shipyard had ever seen. The crew was met as conquering heroes. Jester Kincaid was carried off the bridge. Rostova's engine room crew emerged, covered in grease and radiation burns, to a standing ovation. Aris Thorne, however, was in quarantine, Not for radiation, but for debriefing. He sat in a sterile white room facing the 3 admirals of high command. "Let us be clear, Captain Thorne," Admiral Petrova, a woman with a face like iron, said. "You were given a punishment assignment. You were told to escort a convoy. You were not authorized to engage, let alone obliterate, a voltaic prelate's personal command cruiser." "With respect, Admiral," Aris said, his voice level. He was not the same man who had left. He was calmer. "Prelate Cathar engaged us. He called my ship an aberration and intended to correct it. I acted." "You acted," Admiral Singh, the logic expert, interjected, "by flying into a phase lance. The Academy simulations of that maneuver have a 100% failure and total annihilation rate. It was, by every metric, the dumbest possible move." "Which," Aris said, leaning forward, "is precisely why it worked. The Voltaic Prime Codex, their infallible AI, agreed with you. It calculated our maneuver as 0% optimal. It saw suicide. It did not see a ship-wide magnetic field being used as a brute force energy diffuser. It did not see a 20-ton tungsten rock being fired at point-blank range." "The Rostova field," Petrova said, the name already becoming legend. "Your chief engineer, she overcharged a fission reactor's containment field." "Yes, Admiral, she calls it making noise. I'm beginning to understand what she means." Admiral Singh steepled his fingers. "The Voltaic AI, it froze," it stuttered. It failed, because it encountered a paradox. A dumb move that was, in fact, brilliant. "Captain, do you realize what you've done? You haven't just won a battle. You've broken their god." Aris was silent. He hadn't thought of it that way. "The Prime Codex isn't just a battle AI," Singh continued, his voice low. "It runs their imperium. It dictates their strategy, their economy, their lives. They are a species that has outsourced their instinct to a machine. And you and your flying brick just proved that machine is fallible. You didn't just kill a ship, Thorne. You killed their certainty." "So what now?" Aris asked. "Now," Petrova said, "we repair your ship, and we give it a new mission. The Voltaic are silent, which means they are panicked. They are recalculating, and when they are done, they will not send one ship. They will send everything. They cannot allow a paradox to exist. You are no longer a disgrace, Captain. You are now humanity's official logic bomb." "And the crew?" Aris asked. "They are the bomb," Petrova said. "The Bastion is being refitted. But High Command has issued a new directive. It is classified. It is called Protocol Dumb." Aris raised an eyebrow. "No upgrades," Singh explained. "No smart systems. No AI integration. We are doubling down. We are making it dumber, more armor, a bigger Mac gun, and Chief Rostova has been given a blank check to make her reactor as loud, chaotic, and noisy as she can possibly imagine. Your ship, Captain, is to be an insult to physics." 3 weeks later, the TCS Bastion left dry dock. It was uglier than ever. It now had 2 more kilometers of solid armor bolted onto its prow, making it look less like a ship and more like a flying citadel. Its new Mac gun was so large it visibly distorted the ship's silhouette. Aris stood on his bridge. It was the same bridge, same smell, same clanging. Jester was at the helm, tapping his fingers to some ancient, pulsing music. Rostova was in her engine room, which Aris now called the Chaos Core. "She's beautiful, isn't she, Captain?" Rostova's voice cooed over the comm. She sounded like a mother with a new baby. "The new containment coils are leaking so much noise. I think I just gave a sensor probe in the next system a stroke. The Rostova field is no longer a shield. It's a weapon. It doesn't just scramble AI. It broadcasts pure, unfiltered human indecision." I don't even know what that means, Sparks," Aris said, actually smiling. "It means that when the enemy AI tries to predict use, it's not just getting static. It's getting the data equivalent of, should I have that second donut? Did I leave the stove on? I wonder what she meant by that. It's pure cognitive dissonance. It'll drive them insane." "Good," Aris said, his smile fatting, "because they're here." His new mission wasn't a convoy run. It was a taunt. High Command had sent them to the Orion Periphery, the most sacred space in the Voltaic Imperium. It was where their first minds had supposedly ascended, leaving the Prime Codex behind. It was a religious site. And the Bastion was drifting through it, blasting Jester's music on broad-spectrum radio. This time, the Voltaic didn't send one ship. "Contacts," the sensor officer yelled, his voice cracked. Oh gods, Captain, I'm reading a full battle group. No, that's not right. It's the 5th Purification Fleet." The view screen lit up with contacts. Not 1, not 5. 20 Harbinger-class cruisers, all sleek, black, and identical, emerged from slip space. They formed a perfect AI-driven sphere around the lone human ship. They didn't hail. They didn't threaten. Their AI had been recalibrated. They had a new logic. Anomaly DTCTED TCS Bastion. Logic paradox confirmed. New directive, saturation correction. Firing solution, all 20 LANCES. Simultaneous fire. They're not going to talk. Jester yelled, his music cutting off. They're linking their lances. They're not going to try to cut U's. They're going to vaporize the entire sector of space we're in. Eris looked at the tactical display, the sphere of ships, the perfect kill box. The Bastion was tough. It wasn't that tough. The Rostova field could bend 1 lance. It couldn't bend 20. They're adapting, Eris whispered, the old fear returning. They're using our dumbness against us. They're not trying to outsmart us. They're just using overwhelming, brute force. The Voltaic AI had learned its lesson. It had learned that when logic fails, you just get a bigger hammer. "Sparks," Eris said, his voice low, "how much noise can you give me?" All of it, Captain." Rostova's voice was grim. "But it won't be enough. The math, it's just not there. They've got us." On the view screen, 20 stars ignited, 1 on the prow of each Voltaic cruiser. The lances were charging. They had 5 seconds. Eris Thorne closed his eyes. He had failed a smart ship, and now he was going to fail a dumb one. "Wait," Jester said, his voice a whisper. He was staring at his navigation console. "Captain, the Voltaic AI, it's perfect, right? It makes the perfect formation." "Yes, Jester, what about it?" Eris snapped. "The sphere, it's geometrically perfect, which means that the ship on the other side of the sphere is on a direct line of fire with the ship on this side." Eris's eyes snapped open. "Captain," Jester said, a slow, terrifying grin spreading across his face. What happens if we aren't here when they fire?" What are you talking about, Jester? We have nowhere to go." "Sparks," Jester yelled into his comm, ignoring Eris. Can you make the Rostova field physical, not a shield, but a push?" A kinetic pulse," Rostova shrieked. Are you insane? It would detonate the reactor. It would be a bomb. It would tear the ship apart." I don't need a bomb," Jester laughed, his hands flying. I just need a shove, just one, Eris, trust me." 2 seconds, the lances were at full charge. Eris looked at the perfect sphere. He looked at his manic pilot. He betrayed every last shred of his training. "ROSTOVA," Eris bellowed. Give HIS shove now." "Aye, Captain," Rostova screamed. "Fire in THE hole." A sound like 1,000 church bells shattering, and the Bastion vanished. The shove was not a maneuver. It was an exorcism. Deep in the Chaos Core, Elena Rostova didn't just overcharge her reactor. She unleashed it. She opened the containment field on a single vector Z-negative, or, as Jester called it, down. The Rostova field stopped being a chaotic bubble of antilogic and became, for a single femtosecond, a kinetic ram. It wasn't propulsion. It was rejection. The ship in a burst of pure, unadulterated physics-defying force, was punted out of its own location. The bastion dropped in three-dimensional space at a speed that physics should not have allowed. It didn't accelerate. It was simply gone from point A and present at point B, 100 kilometers below the ecliptic plane. The move was so violent that on the bridge Aris Thorne felt his organs try to leave his body. He was slammed into his crash restraints so hard he heard his own ribs creak. The ship screamed. Sound of metal being tortured to its atomic limit. And in the now-empty sector of space where the bastion had been, 20 voltaic phase lances fired. The voltaic prime codex, in its infinite perfect logic, fired all 20 beams at the exact same central point. It was a perfect saturation strike. But the bastion wasn't there, and the 20 ships in their perfect geometrical sphere were. The 10 ships on the top half of the sphere fired their lances down. The 10 ships on the bottom half of the sphere fired their lances up. They all hit the same point, and they all passed through it. A Harbinger-class cruiser, its lance firing, was hit by the lance of its squadron mate on the opposite side. The result was not a battle, it was a massacre, a self-massacre. The voltaic AI was so perfect in its targeting, so simultaneous in its execution, that it had no time to register its own mistake. The lances were on and then they were in. One by one, in a silent, beautiful symphony of stupidity, the voltaic ships began to die. Their phase lances gutted their own allies. Elegant crystalline hulls flashed white, their cores breached, and they blossomed into silent fireballs. In less than 2 seconds, the entire 5th Purification Fleet was gone, wiped out by its own perfect logic. 100 kilometers below, the TCS bastion was tumbling end over end, its systems dead, its reactor offline. The kinetic pulse had worked, and it had killed them. The bridge was in total darkness, lit only by the faint, distant light of the exploding voltaic fleet. Jester Aris gasped, unstrapping himself in the zero-G. He was bleeding from his nose. Jester, report. No answer. Aris pushed himself off his chair, floating across the dark pit. Jester was slumped over his console, unmoving. No, no. Aris grabbed his shoulder, yanking him back. Jester was limp. The inertial dampeners, being so primitive, hadn't compensated for the shove. The pilot had taken the brunt of it. Sparks, Aris screamed into his comlink, which was dead. He banged on the comm panel. ROSTOVA, report. A faint hiss, and then her voice, it was a gasp. Captain, I'm here. The reactor, it scrammed, the pulse worked, but it broke it. It broke everything. The containment is gone. The core is, oh gods, Aris, core is exposed. Aris froze. He knew what that meant. An uncontained fission plant. They were sitting on a dirty, fizzling bomb. How long, he whispered. I don't know, sir, Rostova wept. Her voice was no longer defiant. It was terrified. Minutes, an hour, the radiation. It's everywhere. I can't get near it. The safeties are melted. We're dead. Dead, they had won. They had defeated 20 of the galaxy's most advanced warships by tricking them into shooting each other. And their reward was to be slow-cooked by their own reactor. No, Aris said. His voice was steel. His AI training was gone. His fear was gone. All that was left was the bastion, dumb, stubborn, angry. We are not dead, he said, pulling himself to the engineering comm. Sparks, listen to me. What do you need? I can't fix it, she cried. The control rods are fused. I can't stop it. Then don't stop it, Aris said, his mind racing. He wasn't a smart captain anymore. He was a dumb one, and dumb problems required dumb solutions. If we can't contain it, Then we release it. What? That's insane. Is it more insane than sitting here and dying? Aris roared. He looked at the dead bridge, at Jester's body. Rostova, the Mac gun, does it still have a slug in it? I think so, sir, but we have no power to fire it. We don't need power, Aris said, a terrible, brilliant, idiotic idea forming in his mind. We've got an exposed fission reactor. You said you can't contain it, so don't aim it. Aim the reactor, Rostova whispered, horrified. Yes, aim the meltdown, channel the entire, failing, uncontained reaction, down the magnetic accelerator cannon's barrel. Forget the magnets, just use it as a nozzle, use the meltdown as propulsion. We don't fire the slug, we become the slug. There was a long silence, and then Elena Rostova laughed. It was a wild, unhinged, glorious sound. Captain Aris Thorne, she gasped. That is the dumbest fucking idea I have ever heard. I love it. Give me 5 minutes. I'm going to try and weld a reactor to a gun. Aris pushed himself back to the helm. He pulled Jester gently from the seat. You did good, son, he whispered. He strapped himself in. The ship was dead. The controls were cold. Rostova, I'm at the helm. It's up to you. Make it count. Aye, sir. Her voice was grim. He heard the hiss of a plasma torch. She was outside the core, doing it herself. Then a new alert flickered to life, a proximity alert, a new contact. Aris looked up. A single ship was drifting out of the wreckage of the Voltaic fleet. It wasn't a cruiser. It was massive, 10 kilometers long. A Voltaic dreadnought. It had been cloaked in the center of the formation, observing. It was the Prime Codex's will, the Voltaic flagship, the AI itself. It hailed them, not with a prelate, but with the AI's own voice, a cold, serene, androgynous sound. Terran aberration, your logic paradox is impressive. You have destroyed fleet, but your reactor is failing. You are terminatd. Rostova, Aris whispered. I need more time, she yelled back. The Voltaic dreadnought began to charge its own lance, a beam the size of a city. They were dead in the water. Aris looked at his dead console, dead except for one blinking red light, a light he hadn't seen before. It was next to a button, Jester's secret button, the one he'd bolted to the side of his console. Aris pushed it. It wasn't a thruster, it was a tape deck. Suddenly, Jester's ancient, pulsing, thumping music blared across all channels, at maximum volume, broadcasting out into the void, a posthumous insult. On the dreadnought, the Prime Codex's serene voice actually stuttered. What is that noise? And in that second of AI confusion, Rostova's voice screamed over the comm. Captain, it's welded. She's all yours, ride the bomb. Aris slammed his fists onto the Mac gun's manual firing studs. This is for JESSETER, you bastard. And the meltdown hit. It was not propulsion, it was birth. The exposed, fizzling, uncontrollable fission core of the Bastion, channeled by Elena Rostova's last desperate act of engineering blasphemy, found its nozzle, the spinal mount Mac gun barrel. A geyser of pure, unfiltered radioactive hell erupted from the prow of the Bastion. It wasn't a beam. It was a pillar of fire. Solid-looking jet of white-hot plasma radiation and vaporized reactor parts. The recoil wasn't a kick, it was a punch from God. The Bastion, this dead, crippled hulk, launched backwards, tumbling violently away from the Voltaic dreadnought. The ship was now a comet, its reactor fire, its tail. But the jet of fire, the meltdown plume, shot forward. The Prime Codex's will, the Voltaic Dreadnought, was a ship of perfect logic. Its AI was still reeling from the sound of Jester's thumping bass line, which it was trying to analyze as a weaponized code. ANALYZING, audio assault, frequency is illogical, chaotic. It was so distracted by the dumb music that it was 2 full seconds late in identifying the real threat. By the time it did, the pillar of core meltdown was upon it. The Dreadnought's shields were smart. They were tuned to energy, to kinetics. They were not tuned to receive a radioactive sandblasting. It wasn't an impact. It wasn't a lance. It was filth. The reactor plume hit the Dreadnought's prow and splashed. White-hot fission products, traveling at relativistic speed, simply bypassed the shield's energy matrix and coated the hull. The elegant obsidian ship was instantaneously painted with a layer of corium, plasma, and death. The radiation alarms inside the Voltaic ship must have been deafening. The AI core, its delicate crystalline processors, were bathed in a wave of gamma rays so intense it warped the laws of physics. The Prime Codex screamed. It wasn't a human sound. It was a burst of corrupted data on all channels. The AI, God in the machine, was dying not from a weapon, but from poison, from radiation sickness. Error, error, corruption, data cascade, logic. Logic is noise. It is all noise. The Dreadnought's lance, which had been at full charge, didn't fire. It fizzled. The containment failed and the lance detonated inside the ship. The Prime Codex's will, the heart of the Voltaic Imperium, cracked in half. It didn't explode violently. It just broke, and the light inside it went out. Back on the bastion, the reactor plume sputtered and died. The ship was now truly dead, its fuel spent in one glorious, idiotic insult. It was tumbling backwards, adrift in a graveyard of its own making. Aris was panting, his hands still locked onto the useless Mac controls. The bridge was silent, except for the faint, tinny sound of Jester's music, which was still playing on the open channel. Sparks and Aris whispered. His voice was hoarse. Elena, report. Silence. Elena, I need a report. Are you there? A long, agonizing pause, and then a cough, a wet, painful sound. Here, sir, Rostova's voice gasped. It was barely audible. The weld it held, the reactor, it's empty. It's just a hot box now, but I'm outside the door. The radiation. I couldn't get back inside containment. My suit didn't hold Aris. Aris closed his eyes. He knew what radiation poisoning at that level meant. She had seconds, minutes at most. You did it, Elena, he whispered, his voice cracking. He was crying. You saved us. We're alive. Wasn't it glorious, though? She gasped, and he heard a faint, bloody smile in her voice. All their logic, all their smart ships, and we just barfed on them. We used a meltdown as a rocket. It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen, Aris said, a sob catching in his throat. Yeah, she sighed. Her voice was getting weaker. Make sure they put that on my plaque. Elena Rostova, she rode the bomb. Her calm hissed static. Elena, Aris whispered, sparks. Nothing. He was alone, on a dead ship, with a dead pilot, a dead engineer, in a field of 21 dead enemy ships. He's had won. Humanity's had won. The TCS Bastion, dumbest ship in the galaxy, had obliterated the Voltaic Imperium's god. And Aris Thorne sat in the dark in the captain's chair, letting the silence and the thump-thump-thump of Jester's music wash over him. He was the victor, and he had never felt so dumb. The music played for 3 days. Jester's ancient, thumping, defiant soundtrack was the only thing moving in the Orion periphery. It was a funeral dirge for an empire and a wake for a crew. On the third day, the TCS Vigilant Admiral Petrova's flagship jumped into the system. It was a Terran smartship, all polished white and blue light. It slid to a halt amidst the graveyard. The Vigilant's bridge was silent as they scanned the scene. 21 voltaic wrecks, one flagship, cracked open, glowing faintly with radiation. And in the middle of it all, a dark, cold, tumbling brick of slag blasting music. My God, Admiral Singh whispered, standing on Petrova's bridge. They didn't defeat them. They erased them. What happened here? Get me a life sign, Petrova ordered, her voice like iron. One life sign, Admiral, the sensor officer reported, his voice shaking. In the captain's chair, it's faint, but it's there. He's alive. A rescue team boarded the Bastion an hour later. They found Aris Thorne strapped into the helm seat. He was unconscious, suffering from severe G-force trauma and moderate radiation exposure, but he was breathing. They found Jester's body, and they found the fused radioactive mess that was the engineering bay, with Rostova's melted spacesuit slumped near the wreckage of her Chaos Core. When Aris woke up, he was in the sterile white medbay of the Vigilant. Admiral Petrova was sitting by his bed. "Captain Thorne," she said. Her voice was soft. He had never heard her voice soft. They're gone," Aris rasped, his throat dry. "Jester, Sparks." "Yes," Petrova said. They're gone. Their actions have been noted, Captain. They will receive the Star of Terra, posthumously." And the Voltaic?" Aris asked. Petrova looked away. The Imperium has collapsed. The moment the Prime Codexes will died. AI that ran their entire civilization just stopped. Their ships stopped. Their power grids failed. Their life support shut down. It's chaos. They are a people who forgot how to live without their god, and you killed their god. Aris was silent. He hadn't wanted this. He hadn't wanted genocide. He had just wanted to survive. You did not just win a war, Aris," Petrova continued. You ended a species' way of life, and you proved to us, to everyone, that our smart war philosophy is flawed. She stood up. The surviving Voltaic, the ones who are relearning how to run their own ships, how to think for themselves, they have asked for a truce. They are terrified of us. They call humanity the Chaos Vermin. They say we are a species that fights with madness, that we are illogical. We are not illogical," Aris whispered, thinking of Rostova's laugh and Jester's music. We're just human." "Yes," Petrova said. "The Admiralty Board is changing its doctrine. Protocol Dumb is no longer a secret. It is now the cornerstone of our new fleet. We are building more Bastion-class ships. We're nomming the first one the TCS Rostova, the second one the TCS Jester." Aris closed his eyes. His tears leaked out. They were smart ships, Admiral," Aris said. "The Voltaic. They were elegant, perfect. They knew the optimal move in every situation. They knew the math of the universe. But they didn't know us," Petrova finished. "No," Aris said, his voice heavy with the weight of his victory. He looked out the viewport at the wreckage of the Bastion, which was being gently towed by the Vigilant. It was a hideous, melted, insulting piece of junk. It was the dumbest thing he had ever seen. And it was a monument to the one truth that all the galaxy's smartest AIs had failed to calculate. That logic can predict everything, except what a human being is willing to do when they are dumb enough, angry enough, and brave enough to simply refuse to die.